Here we are, 1820 to 1830. Fun fact, I just was looking back over the last tutorial that I made, and I realized that I must have said the word interesting 147 times. And given that I might not have time to re-record that particular decade, please accept my apologies for repeating. Just know that it's implied that anything that I'm covering or anything you discover on your own that you find fascinating is something that I want you to look a little into in the assignment that's due at the conclusion of the decade. So I'm going to try to do this next 10 years without using the word interesting at all. Okay, let's look at our timeline. This decade begins with James Monroe as the President of the United States, and Congress, Foreign Slaves, and Act of Piracy. So I'm not sure if the area of political historical documents is the area for you, but I want to show you one quick trick to locating information about any of these political government documents. If I see a .gov, that generally indicates that the information provided within that website is going to be vetted. And one such page is the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, which is an important piece of Americana that, remember, nations were taking America as, we're going to claim this, we're going to claim that, this is our land, you can't have it. And there was a tremendous amount of turmoil over the acquisition of land properties in the United States. And the Monroe Doctrine was important because remember that the settlers had risked all to come to a new nation to have a new life experience. The three main concepts of the Monroe Doctrine are separate spheres of influence for Americas and Europe, non-colonization, and non-intervention were designed to signify a clear break between the New World and the autocratic realm of Europe. And so, when I decide upon a course of study, I often go to Google and type in study guide and look for information about the topic I've chosen. If I'm lucky enough to have a library system such as we are blessed with at our school, I will contact that librarian, seek out resources there for study guides. If I don't have the luxury of that library resource, then I can look up study guides and find all kinds of all kinds of help in learning that particular piece of literature that I want to understand better. In 1820, Joseph Smith, the originator of the Mormon Church, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, began his church. The point of Joseph Smith is that the accepted puritanical ideas of Christianity were becoming a subject of interpretation. And so instead of everybody has to believe in this church, and if you don't believe in this church, this or that is going to happen, America was developing in a way that allowed for a variety of interpretations. Our Joseph Smith was one such person. Nice looking fellow. Very nice person as far as I can tell. Well, what Joseph did was, as a young, inquisitive 14-year-old, Joseph was determined to know which of the many religions he should join. And in a Bible passage, he read the words, "Ask of God," and On one morning in the spring of 1820, he went to a secluded woods to ask God which church he should join. And according to his account, he was visited by two personages who identified themselves as God the Father and Jesus Christ. He was told not to join any of the churches. In 1823, he was visited by an angel, Moroni, who told him of an ancient record containing God's dealings with the former inhabitants of the American continent. And so he created the Book of Mormon. This is the Mormon Church, and the church is built upon an area in Salt Lake City called Temple Square, and I've been there several times, and perhaps you've heard of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I have heard this choir, and they are incredible. It's incredible. I sat right up over in here, and I'm going to attach at the bottom of this tutorial a little bit of the singing of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir for you to enjoy. Because there's a bit of a dichotomy between the incredible worship. They're the nicest people. I didn't come across one person in that entire... I've been there 3 or 4 times. I've been to Temple Square, and I've been to Brigham Young's house, who was also a Mormon, set up the Mormon Church in Utah. And the interesting thing, or I said it again, about the Mormons is that instead of ideas or suggestions or interpretations, their policies, their doctrine is strict and rigid. One of the things they believe is that the American continent was originally settled by ancient Near Easterners. Another thing they believe is Native Americans are the descendants of ancient Israelites. They believe that dark skin is a sign of God's curse, white skin a sign of God's blessing. I'm not sure where that interpretation comes from, but they will find chapter and verse to substantiate their hard beliefs. The Book of Mormon is based on a historically accurate and believable ancient work. And that ancient work came to Joseph Smith in gold plates. And the Book of Mormon says that there were 11 witnesses to these gold plates. And those ancient prophecies in Mormon scriptures foretell the coming of Joseph Smith. According to Joseph Smith, he restored what the Catholics had removed from the Bible. The Church of Latter-day Saints doctrines are not significantly different from those of the mainstream Christian denominations. And this quote, "If ye abide not by the covenant plurality of wives, then ye are damned." They believe in multiple wives, that a man should and is expected to have more than one wife. Fun fact, a friend of mine who is married says, yeah, if you can handle more than one wife, good luck to you. So another thing is that Joseph Smith says that he translated the Book of Abraham from Egyptian papyri. So we have papyrus and we have gold tablets. The Book of Mormon absolutely states that Joseph Smith was a highly ethical, honest, self-truthing, law-seeking, law-abiding person. And these are some accounts from people who knew him, who felt differently about him. Take that for whatever that is. Now, this list of do's and don'ts for the Mormons is compiled by a person who is a devout Mormon. And I want to make sure that any true account of anything is told from the point of view of somebody who subscribes to those doctrines. So there's no sex before marriage and complete fidelity after marriage. Now, remember that they're married to several people, and so their fidelity takes on a different kind of a meaning. No alcohol or drugs, no dishonesty. Donate 10% or more of your income to charity and the building up of the kingdom of God, and that's a must. That's not something that is a suggestion. Do not view pornography. Do not engage in same-sex relations. Dedicate Sundays to the Lord. No foul language. No cigarettes, coffee, or tobacco. Teenagers shouldn't date until 16 years old. No abortion. No gambling. This belief that God judges our hearts causes me to question a couple of things, and I've mentioned this to folks when I have visited the Mormon Church, and that is if they cherry pick some things out of the Old Testament, and they've built an entire religion based on those cherry-picked items that they have selected from the Bible to use as their doctrine. And so I'm confused that if God made man in his own image, does the color of the skin matter? Because nobody really does know what God would have looked like, and we have no idea what Jesus would have looked like. It depends upon how, and lots of people have studied where Jesus was born, what he would have looked like, but what difference does it make? If God is judging all of our hearts, and our willingness to obey his commandments is simply a manifestation of that heart, what difference does it make what color a person is? I don't understand that, and I've never met anybody who could explain that one to me. That's enough for me on Joseph Smith and the Mormon Church, but I point that out as a religion that is certainly narrow in its focus, that was created in 1820. I find that anyway. All right, moving on. The whaling ship, the Essex Net, rammed in and sunk in the Pacific. Survivors are 94 people found dead later, and after a grueling ordeal that includes near starvation and cannibalism. As a sailor aboard the Essex Net in 1840, Herman Melville, and I'm sure you may have heard of Herman Melville and his stories of the sea, and there's one thing that I've listed as one of the novels that I think is a tremendous Melville novel that I have always liked better than Moby Dick, and that is White Jacket. It's a shorter novel, and oh man, you can just smell the salt water. Missouri enters the Union as the 24th state, and that balances 12 slave states and 12 free states. Political races are often contested, and in 1824, John Quincy Adams is elected president against Andrew Jackson, who there's some stuff going on there in rooms about that election. So that was a political presidency that was certainly questionable. And back to the Native Americans, treaties are being signed, handing over Creek lands. Creek is the Creek Indians. The Erie Canal opened up the world in ways that are going to allow for trade routes and transportation. You can see this. Travel journals were very popular during this particular time as people explored and wrote descriptions of what they saw as they traveled. This website is eyewitnesstohistory.com. I think it's a good website. I think that most of the information in here would be clear, vetted information, and I wanted to point out this 1836 article and description of the canal and what that opened up for exploration. So descriptive writing was very popular. And so that goes. Throughout our journey of early American literature, I believe that you and I both have come to appreciate the gutsy women who stood forth with an opinion. It was a challenging and risky thing to do, to stand forth as a woman and state an opinion. Many women published their works under a pseudonym of a man's name or simply initials. And then we come to our Fanny, Frances Wright, otherwise known as Fanny. In approximately the same time period as Joseph Smith was following his path and developing a Mormon theology, Frances Wright wrote, "We are on the earth, and they tell us of heaven. We are human beings, and they tell us of angels and devils. We are matter, and they tell us of spirit. We have 5 senses whereby to admit truths, and a reasoning faculty by which to build our belief upon them, and they tell us of dreams dreamed thousands of years ago, which all our experience flatly contradicts. Receive no man's assertion, believe no conviction but your own, and respect not your own until you know that you have examined both sides of every question, collected all evidence, weighed, compared, and digested it." Can you imagine? What a neat woman. And here's what she did. She published a plan for the gradual abolition of slavery and established the Neshoba community in Tennessee as a cooperative in which slaves could earn their freedom. What? That's our Fanny. Kind of proud of some of these women who spoke up in voices that had often been silenced. Freemasons was another group that formed, and the Freemasons basically believed that Freemasonry is not a religion, but it does stress that there is one supreme being and no women are allowed. Well, okay. Well, in 1826, former Freemason William Morgan of Batavia, New York, exposed Masonic secrets in illustrations of Masonry, and he disappeared from Canandaigua, New York jail under mysterious circumstances, never seen again. A general belief that the Freemasons had killed him for revealing their secrets leads to the formation of an anti-Masonic party, the first third party in American politics. What's up with that? In 1827, the Creek Indians signed another treaty, giving up more of their lands in western Georgia, and the Santa Fe Trail was established. And John Quincy Adams, who was president in 1824, guess who's back? That's right, Andrew Jackson, elected president, winning 178 electoral votes. Sequoyah is one of the most interesting characters in Native American history. He was so brilliant and educated, and he decided that the problem with the Native Americans adjusting to this new world that had been presented to them was that they need to become educated. And so he created an alphabet, a language, a treaty, a constitution, and he was just an incredible human being. And I remember studying him, and I highly recommend Sequoyah as a peaceful. They were so brilliant. They could farm anything. They could grow anything they could take. Just give them one little piece of land and they would make it into something fabulous. Incredible person. And they created the first American newspaper. Now we're going to pick this up in 1830 and we're going to move on because our friend Andrew Jackson is busy. We're going to conclude this decade with a little overview of some of the literature, not a complete list. Washington Irving is still alive and well and publishing books and novels. James Fenimore Cooper, another prominent writer. Again, the Cherokee language and the Cherokee alphabet, the entire story of Sequoia. James Fenimore Cooper, The Pioneers. Washington Irving, Tales of the Traveler. Lydia Maria Child Hobanock. James Seaver, A Narrative of Life of Mrs. Mary Jemison. I don't know those, but I could be persuaded to study them. The Last of the Mohicans is James Fenimore Cooper's most, well, published books, and one that is taught often, Graham's Magazine. Edgar Allan Poe, our darling Edgar Allan Poe. You know, he started writing in 1827. Isn't that something? Edgar Allan Poe is always so new, now happening. People love to study Edgar Allan Poe, read his poetry, read his stories, and sometimes it takes me aback to remember that he began his writing career in the 1820s. Hawthorne, one of my favorite American authors, wrote Fanshawe. We'll get a little bit more to him in the next decade. And Poe is continuing to publish his poetry. He's an editor. He's got an incredible life. All right, folks, that wraps up this decade of 1920 to 1930. Remember to click on the video below to have a listen to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. That concludes this tutorial.